Welcome to the Smart Money, a new monthly show from A State of Mind. Delighted to be joined by our first guest, Colin Watt, as you know from other State of Mind podcasts, for this first edition of the Smart Money. Colin, how you doing today?
Dave, it's great to be here. Delighted to see you've now got your own show here on A State of Mind, and looking forward to seeing it grow over the next few months.
For sure, and thanks, Mel, for coming on. So we'll kind of kick off with just an overview of what the show's going to focus on moving forward, then dive into the running order, and we'll go from there. We're hoping to have a guest on from China at the end of the show, but it's still a bit up in the air, so we'll let you know on that. So basically, the overview of the show is it's going to be focused on the business of football, because football is a business now. It's less focused on day-to-day and more focused on big-ticket items, World Cup bids, reforms to the game that will have long-lasting implications. We'll also aim to interview some interesting characters from the world of football from all over the globe. So in today's show, we're going to, first of all, kick off with the Irish and UK World Cup bid, potential reforms to the Champions League, and what this might mean for clubs. Then a new craze in digital memorabilia and what it might mean for sports fans. And then a focus on iconic shirt sponsorships off the back of the news of Inter Milan splitting from Pirelli tyres after 26 years together. And as said, we're hoping to have a guest on at the end of the show to discuss the situation in China and give you a full overview if that does happen. So jumping into it, first of all, Ireland and the UK, a potential World Cup bid. So to coincide with the UK budget this month, the UK government announced its intention to launch a joint bid with Ireland to host the 2030 World Cup. It was revealed in an exclusive interview given by Prime Minister Boris Johnson to The Sun. So Colin, what were your thoughts when you heard the news initially? Good thing, bad thing, realistic?
I mean, it's always a good thing when you see major tournaments and major cup finals coming a bit closer to home. I remember, obviously, in fact, the first one I remember is far back. I don't remember Euro 96, but I do remember the bid back in 2000 when it was Scotland and Ireland bidding for the 2008 Euros. I actually remember being in primary school and there was a competition by the SFA at the time, and you had to design the poster that they should use for the official World Cup bid. So yeah, there's always been a thing about bringing these competitions closer to home, and I think this is maybe like the fourth or fifth time now that the British government at least have tried to bring something here. I think England have had a couple of failed attempts, but yeah, this one really looks an interesting prospect because it actually covers all of the countries within what's probably classed as the United Kingdom and Ireland. I'm trying not to be too political here, because obviously you'll have your own thoughts on that, and so will everyone else watching. But no, I mean, you take a look at it. This is the first one of the first World Cups where we're going to have to be expanded to 48 teams. You're going to need, I think it's 16 stadiums. Yeah. So to do that across as many countries within a confined space, I think that's a good idea. And just maybe seeing the likes of Brazil, Argentina, all at Hampden or Murrayfield, I think that would be great for any Scotsman.
For sure. And I suppose to give kind of viewers and listeners an overview, the bidding process is going to begin in 2022. The criteria to submit a bid is you have to have 6 stadiums that have over 20,000 seats in capacity. And you're looking at rival bids, potentially from Spain and Portugal on a joint bid, the Balkans, which will consist of Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, and Serbia, potential South American bid, Colombia and Peru, and maybe Argentina. There likely won't be any Asian bids just due to Qatar 2022. And Morocco will probably submit another bid off the back of losing the 2026 World Cup bid to the US. So I suppose one of the key things that springs to my mind is there's a lot of noise about what these World Cups are worth economically to a country. And a lot of it doesn't really stack up, to be honest. It's obviously great from a reputation for a country. It's great for the fans. Do you think we really actually need to have an honest conversation moving forward about the benefits of these tournaments, especially in light of Brazil and even the World Cup there, the amount of outlay in terms of money, and some of those stadiums are basically lying dormant?
Yeah, I think you see that now with a lot of these tournaments. It's not just the World Cup. You see it with the Olympics as well. You take a look at China's stadiums and what they built for the Olympics being over there in Beijing. I mean, a lot of those sort of like the big swimming pools, they're all lying empty. Brazil stadiums are now turned into slums. It just shows you like there's obviously a kind of government side of this that says we want to show the best of what this country can do. And you take a look at Brazil, I mean, they were building 60, 70,000 seater stadiums basically on the verges of the favelas. It just didn't make any sense. You went from this extreme rich to extreme poverty within less than a quarter of a mile. And you just wonder if that money could have been spent by these countries to actually develop that instead of putting it into hosting these showcase events. Now, you can understand why they want to, because the spotlight is on your country for a whole month, and everyone wants to have the World Cup in their own country. But I just think, considering what we've been through over the last 12 to 15 months with the COVID pandemic, I think some of these countries that were previously thinking about bidding for it will probably drop out.
For sure. And again, just kind of a bit of background on this. A study from Hamburg University looked at the 2006 German World Cup, which by all accounts was hugely successful. Fans loved the quality of football. It was a very well-run tournament. However, the study itself found that there was no meaningful boost to the German economy. So with that kind of in mind, what we've seen a lot of more recently, probably from about the 2002 World Cup onwards, is these joint bids. Mm-hmm. And do you see that as a way of countries nearly mitigating the money aspect and trying to share that load in terms of creating new stadiums and just making it a bit more realistic that one country shouldn't have to build so many stadiums?
I think you see that with the current setup for what is now Euro 2021, with the idea of hosting it across 12 different countries, was to take that pressure off the one country from having to develop all these stadiums. So it does probably make sense to a financial aspect of having it. And I guess you kind of get to get that bit of glory of holding the World Cup when maybe, for example, Scotland's maybe only going to have 2 stadiums involved in that, maybe 3. The vast majority will be England, and it will be seen as a sort of English World Cup. But you've just been able to kind of get a couple of games up there in Scotland. So I think it's clever by the main nation of it. And I think the biggest one you'll see of that coming up is the US, Canada, and Mexico bid. A lot of those games will be held in the US. You'll see very few in Mexico and Canada. And a lot of people will see it as the US World Cup. But they've managed to mitigate the cost by having these 2 partner countries help them out. So it's probably very clever from their side.
And do you think the UK and Ireland will actually win it? You know, thinking in mind of the last bid that England had in particular in 2018, which obviously they didn't win. They got 2 votes out of 22 votes. Mm-hmm. And it cost 21 million to put together, 21 million sterling to put together that bid. Do you think the UK and Ireland are in a good position just because of the existing infrastructure there? Fantastic stadiums, as you said, even in Glasgow. In Dublin, there's the Aviva, mm-hmm. and obviously England with all the Premier League teams. Do you think it is a realistic, they could do it compared to the other bids that we've mentioned? There's
one thing that kind of catches my eye about this World Cup. It's the 100-year anniversary of the World Cup, the 2030 World Cup. And for anyone that isn't aware, the first World Cup was obviously held in Uruguay. And I believe I was reading into it earlier that Uruguay are potentially looking to put a bid in to host this World Cup along with a couple other countries. I think for the nostalgia aspect and for the romanticism, I would love to see it go back to where it originally began, with it being the 100-year anniversary. So I think it will probably go to South America, this tournament.
And what do you think that would be? What would that mean for you as a football fan if you want to see a Scotland game in terms of the outlay in money? Is it realistic? Do you think fans from Europe would go to Uruguay? Is it a bit easier to get to than, say, Qatar?
I mean, I think if Scotland qualified for any sort of tournament, you'd see members of the Tartan Army flying all over the world to get there. Even if they held it in Antarctica, you'd probably find a couple of Scotland fans there. But I mean, I guess in terms of political aspect, it's probably a better choice than Qatar, considering we all know what's going on over there right now. Again, though, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. These countries could probably be doing with investing the money in their own country, on their own people, instead of hosting a major tournament. But can you really discriminate against them? And if FIFA were able to support them to bring home the World Cup on its 100th anniversary, I just like the kind of romantic idea behind that.
And who do you think benefits most from World Cups? So, and I mean this from a financial aspect, is it really FIFA who benefits most? Again, hitting upon the economic aspects. If we look at, say, Qatar, for example, they are going to spend roughly 140 billion on new stadiums, but because the country never had these stadiums in the first place. Brazil spent 12 billion, and as you said, some of these stadiums near the Amazon haven't been used since. So who do these World Cups actually benefit? You know, obviously the fans love the game and everything, but who do you think it's just pure money driven by FIFA?
I mean, without being 100% skeptical, I'd say it is. I mean, you take a look at things like the World Cup in South Africa. Was Africa really ready to host a major tournament like that? South Africa is probably one of the most developed countries within Africa, and again, that wasn't ready to host it. That's why I don't think the bid for Morocco will be successful. Europe gets it quite often, but a lot of these countries that it does go to in Europe, they already have the infrastructure, so it's already there. It is about the kind of financial aspect of where you stand in the developing world. But when you take a look at the situation we're in at the minute with COVID, I mean, you can see it from who's been able to get access to vaccines. The more developed countries have been able to do it, whereas a country like Mexico might not even start their vaccination program until later this year because they've not been able to afford it. So what does that say for the African countries? What does that say for the South American countries? I think this has been a complete reset for world finances, and a lot of these kind of bids that you were talking about that were in place maybe 12, 18 months ago, once they take a look at the effect that's happened to their country's finances afterwards, they'll be like, look, hands up, we can't afford this anymore.
And then with that in mind, going back to, I suppose, the situation with Euro 2020 or 2021, whatever way you want to call it, obviously it's going to be around the whole continent of Europe. So in future, could we see a World Cup in South America with a similar setup? Do you think that's realistic, again, to not have one country having to shell out, particularly in a developing country, having to shell out for 14, 16 new stadiums?
I wouldn't be surprised to see it. And as you say, it's becoming more and more likely with the introduction of, for example, the American, Canadian, Mexican World Cup. I mean, that's a vast amount of land that you're covering there just to hold a World Cup. And you take, for example, Qatar. Qatar's a relatively small country, and that's going to be hosting the World Cup. When you compare that to America, Mexico, and Canada, that's just massive. It's probably some of the American states are bigger than Qatar for this kind of size of land. It'll come down to where the money is, I think. And if someone like Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay wants to combine to do a bid, and it kind of ticks all the boxes that FIFA want, has the monetary backing, you'll probably see something like that. But I can't see it going kind of to the point of where it might be, I don't know, like Australia and China that hold a World Cup. I think it will be very close-knit countries.
And how do you feel about the Qatar World Cup? Would you go to Qatar to actually see Scotland play?
Probably not. I mean, you're talking about the outlay for a starter to get there, and that's going to cost a lot of money for these fans to get there. Now, I enjoy watching the national team. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting down to London to see Scotland play at Wembley, but I don't think I could go that far as Qatar. But I know there is people that I know personally that are within the Tartan Army that doesn't matter where it is, they'll go. And I just guess it depends how strongly you feel about your team and how much you want to back them. But me personally, I wouldn't go to Qatar.
And do you think, I suppose Qatar is nearly like a once in a lifetime. Not many countries can put that much money into basically starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And FIFA probably won't go this route again, because other countries probably just won't have that volume of money. And as you said, I think you're right. A lot of fans will, one, think it's too far because of the outlay of costs, and two, some fans just from a purely political standpoint with everything that went on with the stadiums may actually decide maybe I shouldn't be giving money to this tournament as well. And again, as you said, what's a key consideration moving forward beyond the Qatar World Cup is the fact that the tournament is going to be expanding significantly to 48 teams. So that basically means there's going to be far more games, more stadiums. roughly there will be 80 games over 32 days, requiring 16 stadiums. So any country beyond 2026, the outlay in terms of either upgrading current stadiums or starting from scratch with new stadiums is going to be huge. It'll be such a financial burden. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. Moving on to our second topic, this is around the Champions League and potential reforms. So obviously we're rumbling towards the final of this year's Champions League in May in Istanbul, but it's looking like serious changes to the current format are going to take place by 2024. It's the so-called Swiss model, as it's been dubbed. We're looking at an expansion of from 32 teams to 36 teams. There'll be no groups, basically. Participants would form, in effect, one massive league. So this is still rumbling on, but what were your initial kind of thoughts when you heard these reforms? Do you think it's needed? Do you think the structure they're talking about is a good thing?
For me, again, and it's quite ironic because this is the Smart Money podcast, but it's all about money with UEFA. It's all about a way of helping them retain as much of the revenue as possible. I mean, I know that they're talking about expanding to include an extra 4 teams, but when you look at the amount of teams that are sort of your big hitters now, if you take a look at the Europa League this season, Spurs, Arsenal, Man United, AC Milan, these are the kind of teams that UEFA want in the Champions League because they know that the revenue that they would get in from sponsors, from television deals, from fans, by having these teams in. So the kind of landscape of European football to say, well, who are your big teams now? That's expanded. I mean, long gone are the days where your big teams in Italy were the likes of Parma, even teams like Chievo who were making it into the latter rounds of UEFA Cup. Now you've got, you look at Atalanta, who are doing very well in this year's tournament. We're unlucky to lose out to Real Madrid. In England, there's no top 4 anymore. It's more a top 6, top 7. And they're all very well financially backed teams. So I think European football was learning to adapt to that, but does it take away from the prestige of what the Champions League actually is? I think so. It's more driven towards this sort of European Super League that's been floated for a long time now.
And building upon that, the system they want to put in place is a rankings system, basically. It's going to be teams ranked from 1 to 36 by their UEFA club coefficients. So very much hits upon what you said. If a club hits a vein of form over maybe a decade, suddenly they're turbo boosted into the reformatted Champions League. Do you think overall that's fair?
What is fair now in football? I mean, financial fair play. Is it fair play as to what the reputation of teams are? Because when you take a look at it, some of the former teams that were massive in the sort of 60s and 70s, teams like Celtic, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, they're going to be nowhere near the kind of prestige level that European superpowers are looking to bring in. Perhaps maybe Celtic's the exception to that. But these teams, like if you said, oh, Aston Villa's in the Champions League this season, you're going, oh, well, they must have had a great year last year because that'll be a one-off. You'll not see them again. So it's difficult to say what's really fair. It's only going to help the rich get richer is the way that I see this.
And yeah, building upon that, actually, do you think it nearly, at a time when we're talking about financial fair play in the game, and obviously this is a big topic and high-profile cases against Man City, all this type of thing, isn't this going against really financial fair play? Because it's nearly an incentive for teams to pour insane amount of money to get into this, in effect, a Super League, and try and live off that Super League money for years to stay on top. Isn't that really what it's creating, in effect?
Yeah, definitely. That's the way I see it. And as you see, I think it's only going to help the bigger teams retain that money. You take a look at it, I think it's La Liga that has this sort of setup where Real Madrid and Barcelona can almost veto anything that comes in terms of TV deals, in terms of sponsorship. And this is the way this seems to be heading down that line as well, is that it's almost a kind of guarantee that you'll see a Barcelona, a Real Madrid, a Bayern Munich, a Manchester United, a Liverpool in the Champions League, regardless of how they get on in the league. So to me, that makes the European competition more important than the league. And the leagues will feel that effect. And the league that I think is in big trouble if this goes ahead is the English Premier League.
And do you think there'll be serious pushback? We've already seen some teams, I believe it was Crystal Palace, against these type of proposals. They're not going to give away that money pot. These I suppose the also-rans, or as Martin O'Neill called them, the basement dwellers of the Premier League, they're not going to give away that money, are they? They'd be fools to.
I don't know necessarily what the plan will be. I think if you look at the reforms and whether it's going to affect the Champions League, I think it will go through, because there's too many teams with far too big a say in how European football's run. So your likes of your Juventuses, your Manchester Uniteds, they'll all be for this. This is a way for them to increase their revenue year on year. And it gets to the point now where only certain teams in England are targeting that Premier League title. It's probably Man City and Liverpool. Man United would say they were for a while, but not really. Whereas you've seen teams like Arsenal, who Arsene Wenger made a whole career off the idea of, I need to finish top four to finish in the Champions League. There was never really a title push after the first sort of 6-7 years of the millennium. And Arsenal will never be pushing for the title because they can't afford to make that jump and spend the money that's needed. And if you keep playing more games in Europe and it takes away from perhaps a Premier League game or a Champions League game where a team's going into a game on Saturday going, well, actually, I don't really care so much about the performance against Crystal Palace. I'm going to rest X, Y, and Z because on Tuesday night we're going to be playing Real Madrid, and that means more. That then has a detrimental effect to the league.
And focusing on that point, actually, do you think, with that in mind, that European Champions League football will become the only thing that matters? Could we see the elimination of the FA Cup, the League Cup, for example, in the English game? The volume of games players play in the Premier League with all these various cups, even in Scotland as well, is extremely high. Do you think there will have to come a crunch where the volume of games is just too much and the money on offer from the reformed Champions League is too much to kind of turn down? Will teams opt out?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'll definitely see that. You saw it almost with Liverpool when they went to the Club World Cup. Now, there was obviously an incentive for them to go and win that tournament. But in the same sense, they then had to put out, I think, was it an under-19s team against Aston Villa? And was it the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup? I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
So that showed that they cared more about this trophy, which a lot of teams around the world would say, well, I mean, who is it? You're going to be going playing maybe a Chinese team, a Japanese team, and then probably either Sao Paulo or Santos or Corinthians or something like that in the final. The winner of the Copa Libertadores. For us, for normal football fans, would be like, it's held in some country, we're not really going to see it. It's something that you want to win, but it's not a necessity. Whereas the FA Cup is a tournament with a lot of history. And it used to be an amazing thing when you got to the FA Cup final. You'd see teams coming out with cup final songs, and there was always a kind of buzz about the place, both north and south of the border. But then it just showed that Liverpool concentrated on that Club World Cup instead of the FA Cup. So if they had the chance to opt out of that, they would have. And when teams start doing that, that's when it starts losing its prestige. And that's when it's just a case of, oh, well, that's a cup. That's nothing that we're really focusing on. Our focus is on the league or the Champions League. And I think you already see that when it comes to the League Cup, because it gets to maybe the quarter or the semi-final stage before these teams actually play their first team. They've got a sort of cup team that's made up of reserves and youth team players, and then they go to the first team when it gets to almost trophy time.
Do you think there's any way that they could nearly turn that on its head to actually make these, if you want to call them lesser cups, more appealing? So the League Cup, is there any incentive that maybe the FA, particularly in the English game, could offer to some of the top teams? Or is that just completely unrealistic?
I don't really know. I mean, there's a point just being brought up here, and I'll just bring it up, by Donny Boy 67 that says, does a cup win guarantee a European spot nowadays? Now, from what I understand, it does. And even down south in the Carabao Cup, you get a European spot from that. So you'd think that would be the incentive for teams that are less likely to qualify to really have a go. But it's still, I mean, City are playing Spurs in the League Cup final in a couple of weeks' time, and there's not really a buzz about it at all. So it's almost lost any sort of remnants of kind of. I'm trying to think of the right word here because I don't want to sound too disparaging, but it just loses its relevance. I mean, you could play that game on a Tuesday night and the stadiums will be half full because fans aren't that interested. But if you play on a Tuesday night against a Juventus or a Borussia Dortmund or something like that, it will be full. You can see what the fans want to see, and a Tuesday night game against a Stockport County is just not what they're after. It's only when it comes up to the last couple of games, and you can't really just say, well, you're the Premiership team, so you're only getting in for the last couple of rounds. Then it just loses its value completely. So there's a lot of work they really need to do on what it could be for that.
Has broadcasting on such a volume, you can basically watch any game you want. You can even watch reserve games now. Has that volume of broadcasting nearly changed the perception of a fan in terms of, I don't really care about League Cup games because I can, as you said, watch my team play Juventus. And in some ways, it's great having all this access to all these live games. But in another way, it's fundamentally changed how a lot of fans engage with their team, where they might not look at the lower tier games versus the higher tier games. Do you think that has happened maybe through an explosion in broadcasting?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's so accessible nowadays that you can watch your team play. And teams probably struggle with that as well. I mean, you see some stadiums and they're kind of like Barcelona's probably the biggest one there. I've managed to go to the Nou Camp to see a Barcelona La Liga game, and the stadium was only about a third to two-thirds full. And that game's shown live across the nation on television, and it's free to air, I think, over there as well. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, for me, there's nothing better than getting the scarf, get the jersey on, and getting down to actually watch a game of football. But for some people, they've been brought up in this culture of, well, it's on TV, so I don't need to bother. And you only really want to see it when Messi, Ronaldo, Lewandowski and stuff come into town. So I think there's a generation that's sort of been spoiled in that aspect.
I'd completely agree with you. And again, like who's right? There is no right or wrong kind of answer here. But I completely agree with you. I think people, it's nearly like the glory hunter kind of fans. Definitely, they only really care about the most high profile kind of games, which I would agree with you. I think we've lost something nearly like a heritage, particularly around the FA Cup. I remember the FA Cup even from '96 when United beat Liverpool. There was a helicopter in the sky kind of trailing the Liverpool bus as it went to Wembley. The white suits they wore that day, the Spice Boys, all that type of thing. It's something missing. You're not seeing that anymore, which is very sad. And one final question on this topic. There's going to be 4 additional match days added. So what that means is we're going to go from currently 125 games in the format as it is. Mm-hmm. We're going to move to 225 games. So again, going back to that point of cup games and everything else, that volume of games for a high tier kind of professional team, is that sustainable? Really, is that sustainable?
I don't think so. I mean, I think what a lot of fans have experienced over the last sort of 12 months or so is this saturation of football. I mean, Sky, BT, Amazon, BBC, that's just in the UK, that have shown every single Premier League game. And then there's the introduction now of pay-per-views so that you can basically watch your team absolutely anywhere. And every game is shown on television. There's a bit of a saturation because it's 7 days a week and it's maybe 2 or 3 times a day as well. And if you've got to try and fit these games in, it wouldn't surprise me if the European schedule that usually runs Tuesday to Thursday maybe expands to include a Friday or a Saturday now. And it's just, you can't keep up. It's getting impossible to try and keep up. I mean, for example, there's a Premier League game taking place tonight. There'll be 2 or 3 on Saturday, there'll be 4 on Sunday, and then there'll be a game on Monday. You've got to watch the whole 4 days to actually see what's going on in the Premier League. Long gone are the days where everything kicked off on a Saturday at 3 o'clock. That's completely gone. Now you could spend about 5 or 6 hours a day if you wanted to, every single day, watching live football. And everyone says it's like, oh, you can't get enough of it. But believe me, after 12 months, it's like there's games now. Last night's Europa League, I couldn't really be bothered watching it. It's there. People discover other things to watch. I don't think it's good for the game.
I'd agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head there. As a fan, it's so hard to keep up with all the volume of games. That's how I personally find it. And in my own situation, I'm over in the US, so it's even harder because the games aren't even broadcast for the most part over here on free-to-air kind of TV, even league games. I think as well, something that has been gaining a bit of traction, and we might explore it in a future podcast, is younger people. So the younger generation, if you kind of call them Gen Z or whatever, there's research out there that shows that these young people aren't actually watching sports, live sports, not even just football, but live sports like they were. Instead, they're looking at Twitch for live streams of video games, even FIFA, for example. And do you think that might be due to the over kind of population of all these games that it's how do you keep up with it? Like,
I think, and I've been guilty of this myself, it's the accessibility. I mean, football at times can be a boring sport to watch. If you sit and watch a 90-minute game and it finishes 0-0 and there's hardly any chances created, then 9 times out of 10 it's going to have been a boring watch, unless there was something that really got everyone excited, like a bad tackle or something like that. Then it's a hard game to watch. The fact that you can literally like pick up your phone, go onto Twitter, go onto Facebook, and within 15-20 seconds of an instant happening, it's all over social media. So you're not missing anything out. It used to be you had to watch the game live to actually enjoy the game. But I mean, I can go in and on my Sky Q box on a Sunday morning, I don't need to watch Match of the Day. I can see all the highlights, I can see all the goals within a 10-15 minute segment because Sky actually put the Premier League put the Premier League highlights out straight away. So this comes about with the oversaturation, and it comes about with the accessibility. It's like a case of, I'll not watch this live, I'll watch it on record, I'll record it and I'll skip through the boring bits and I'll just see the highlights. And because there is so much on TV, you can't watch 90 minutes every game, and I don't think it's any guilt to that generation, but that buzz about seeing a game on live TV, I think, is just completely gone.
I would feel similar, and it's a sad kind of indictment, I feel, as a fan. And to kind of finish on this kind of topic, UEFA demanded roughly 11 billion for the last broadcast rights. With this format change in mind, they're going to be looking for even more money, and they're probably likely to find it. Which again, what does that mean for the future of the game? And fans might think 2024 is a long way away. It's not really, and teams could be gearing up in terms of signing players to get into this new format, and that's where the game is unfortunately going, in my view. If you're just joining now, welcome to the Smart Money podcast. It's a new podcast from State of Mind. Delighted to be joined by Colin Watt, usual State of Mind contributor. So we've covered kind of World Cup reforms, potential reforms, a World Cup bid from Ireland and the UK, reforms to the Champions League. We're going to dive into something that has actually blown up in the last, I'd say, 2 months in particular. So this is about digital memorabilia. Football memorabilia is long established, and as you can see from Colin, he's got the jersey in the background. I think it's safe to assume that he's a memorabilia fan. You know, classic jerseys, pins, scarves, programs. It's well defined what a football fan will spend money on when it comes to memorabilia. However, could the physical be coming digital? And I mention this because these things, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but they're called non-fungible tokens, NFTs. Thank you. Yeah, that took effort. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are digital memorabilia sold online using cryptocurrency. So what are these things if you're not up to speed? It's basically, it could be a video of a player doing something. So for example, the NBA sold a video of superstar LeBron James dunking a basketball. for over $200,000, and it was just a digital video. And what makes it an NFT? It's a digital certificate. It kind of has a digital barcode, which certifies that a person owns that memorabilia. So, Colin, first of all, are you a big memorabilia fan yourself?
I mean, I like the idea of memorabilia. If I had more money, I would definitely have more of it about the house. There's certain jerseys and certain iconic images I would love to have. In fact, the Paul John Dykes, who runs a State of Mind, he has a studio that's full of football memorabilia, and I think one day that'll eventually be turned into a museum with the amount of stuff that's actually there. But no, I mean, I love the idea of, like, for me, growing up as a Celtic fan, the big thing was the Bumblebee kit, and the Bumblebee kit with Larson 7 on the back. Now, if I could get that framed signed, that would be incredible. So if my girlfriend's watching, you know what to get me for Christmas. But I mean, this idea of digital ownership of things. I mean, this podcast that goes out on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, someone could buy this from us right now. This episode as an NFT, and some of the prices that's gone out for things like tweets, Facebook posts, pictures, and it's like, it's not even as if it's something you would think is very collectible. But for example, I took a look into this. So the person that created Twitter is a guy called Jack Dorsey, and he put his first ever tweet out on the marketplace that's been created to sell these NFTs, and it went for £2.5 million. £2.5 million to just get like a screenshot of that tweet. And like, what is, you don't own the tweet, you own the picture of the tweet. It's just bonkers. I mean, I get the whole boom of the cryptocurrency, the idea of Bitcoin and Dogecoin and everything else like that, but just paying £2.5 million to say I own a picture of that tweet, it blows my mind.
Is it in effect nearly, and I remember even going to Celtic Park, you would have your autograph book, which seems so quaint even now, and it would basically have autographs on the front of it, you know, the label as an autograph kind of book, and you give it to someone and they sign it. Is it roughly like a digital autograph in effect?
I think that's the idea behind it. It all comes about with the idea of blockchain, and if anyone doesn't know what blockchain is, it's like a kind of idea of everything following step by step, and it's recorded so that nothing can really be illegal or stolen behind it. But like, I think you need a degree to understand exactly what's happening with NFTs and with Bitcoin and Dogecoin and stuff like that. And I mean, it's far beyond my level of intelligence, but to pay something like £500,000 to own a picture of LeBron James dunking a ball, you'd be able to buy that in a gift shop for about 50 quid with his signature on it. I know what one I'd rather buy.
Yeah, I'm definitely old school like you. I think this might take a long time to kind of generate interest among fans. Even if you look at the NBA in particular, they're called Top Shots, these videos with LeBron James. And in 7 days in February, it generated £140 million in sales, which again shows there's clearly a market there. And even, you know, football fans might say, oh, this is not going to happen in football because football fans are maybe a bit more old school. That's not really the case. PSG, the French team, has actually signed a licensing deal to, quote, tokenize club stars. And that's not just current club stars like Mbappe. It's also former stars like Beckham. So again, they're looking at this like a long-term kind of nearly, say for example, in the case of Celtic, could it be an NFT of the 67 European Cup final? Could it be something like that, a video like that? Would you buy that maybe in 5 years' time, Colin?
That's a difficult one. I mean, you're obviously going to have these collectors that want the first of everything, and this is a first of everything. Like Kings of Leon released their new album on NFT, and you'll have the super fans that want the first edition of it, and they will be the first of everything. But I mean, when you're looking at the prices that it's going for, and you've not actually got something to physically hold on to to say that this is yours, I don't see it ever clicking off. I think people in Scotland are far too wise to that, and the people that aren't are probably the ones that have far too much money. And as Joseph Byrne, this probably sums up exactly what I'm thinking. It's an old saying, fools are easily parted with their money, and that just seems to be the way it's going.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, we'll see how it develops anyway, and that kind of brings us on nearly nicely into our next kind of topic. So it's about iconic shirt sponsors. So a bit of sad news in my own opinion this month, an end of an era in some ways. It was announced that Pirelli tires will no longer sponsor the Inter Milan jersey. It's an iconic partnership. It really is, in my opinion. 26 years, Ronaldo to Bobo Vieri to Zlatan to Adriano.
All the legends that's played there.
It's sad, isn't it, Colin? Like even though it's a sponsor, even though it's a tire company that you should have no emotional attachment to, it feels like an end of an era.
It isn't. I mean, you always have that one sponsor that's iconically linked to a football team. Liverpool would be Crown Paints. Celtic and Rangers will have like C.R. Smith and McEwen's Lager and even MTL. And it's just like they were only maybe there for maybe 5-10 years. Pirelli was at Inter for so long. Pirelli was Inter. That's the way you see it. When you're associated with for that for so long, you become part and parcel of the same thing. It's almost like when a team moves out of an iconic stadium, which ironically Inter are also doing, moving out of the San Siro. It's a sad day, but I tell you what, we were just talking about collectors of kind of rare memorabilia. Everyone will be wanting that latest Pirelli shirt if it's going to be the last ever one.
Yeah, I think so. And what you said really hits the nail on the head. A brand like Pirelli, which again, a tire brand who for the most part will be interested in that, it will live on in your mind and in my mind. And that's what they want. That's what they want. And they've done their job then. So at a time when maybe teams or sponsors question the value of being on the front of a jersey because they seem to be so interchangeable, if you get it right at the right time on an iconic jersey, you're probably going to live a long time in fans' memories, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so. And there's a really interesting point coming in here from Conor McManus. He's just saying, how big is the impact of this loss to Inter, particularly with the unknown future of the owners? So, I mean, that's probably one, Dave, I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it might be our guest who'll be joining us in a few minutes as well. Sunning in particular, and we'll be speaking with this guest about it. They have actually left Chinese football. In effect, they were basically owning one particular team, Jiangsu FC, and they won the last Chinese Super League, as it's called, the top division there. And only this month said they ceased operations of that team. That's basically like Man City ceasing from one season to the next. It is incredible stuff. Mm-hmm. Very concerning. Very concerning. The Inter situation is quite concerning for sure.
It's always kind of it's always a sad thing when you see a big partnership ending. And Pirelli and Inter, it's like I remember growing up, having some friends that were Italian and Inter Milan was their team. So we would be kicking about in Celtic jerseys. Some of those would be kicking about in Rangers jerseys. And there was always a couple that had the Inter jersey on, and it was just that iconic yellow logo in the middle of the blue and black jersey. It just to see that kind of coming to an end, it brings a tear to the eye to suggest that's the childhood memory completely gone. Definitely,
nothing safe anymore. That's the way I think of it.
No, definitely. And as you've mentioned, obviously it's been a pleasure being on this with you today. I think you've done a fantastic job so far. But we have a very special guest joining us. Do you want to introduce this guest?
Yeah, for sure. So a huge welcome to Cameron Wilson. He's founder of World East Football. It's a news publication focused on the game in China. So it nicely kind of ties in with what we just discussed. Cameron is from Dunfermline. He's been based in Shanghai since 2005. And he's been an expert observer of the Chinese game for over 20 years now. Cameron, how you doing? Thanks, Mil, for coming on.
Good, thanks. It's good to be on.
think we may have some technical issues with Cameron, but we'll try and get through this.
Yeah. So
now it's not the Fife Wi-Fi, so anyone that's watching from Fife, it's not the Dunfermline Wi-Fi. Cameron's actually in China. Is that correct?
Yes, he's in China. He's based in Shanghai. There's always some of these kind of gremlins in the system, particularly on the first shows. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back on.
No, I mean the Chinese Wi-Fi situation's always been a thing, but I think Cameron might be trying to join us again. We'll give it one last try. Welcome back to the show, Cameron.
Hi guys, can you hear me this time?
Perfect. How you doing, Cameron? Thanks a mil for coming on.
All right, glad it's sort of. I heard you talk about the Fife connections. Glad to be.
I think we might still have a few problems here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you there? Is it pretty?
Do you want to turn off your camera? No.
Yeah. So I think we've lost Cameron, which is a shame. It would have been interesting to hear that kind of idea of the story. What we'll do is we'll try and record an interview with Cameron on this and bring it to a future episode of the Smart Money podcast. So going back to the last topic you were just discussing, Dave, the kind of iconic shirt sponsorships. What does this mean for Inter going forward? Who is their new sponsor?
So that it's still I'm not sure in terms of if they've kind of nailed it down. But again, just to go back to that central point of who owns Inter, and similar to the question posed by Connor earlier, basically a company in China called Suning owns Inter. They have, with Jiangsu FC, stopped funding that club, the champions of China, which again is incredible. And the financial situation with Inter is very much up in the air because of this company owning Inter. And I think Pirelli, there'd been rumblings for the last couple of years that maybe that iconic partnership was coming towards an end. And I think when Moratti was in charge of Inter, that was obviously never going to happen. That was going to come to an end. However, with maybe new owners in place, maybe they want a Chinese sponsor on the front because of the link back with China with Suning, and they want to build a brand in China. Maybe that's the play because of their own financial problems. I have to say, it's a sad thing. You can't imagine Inter really playing in another jersey for a modern fan. I think you're on mute, Colin, there.
Apologies. Technical issues on your first episode. That's not what we expect here. We're sorry, Dave. But no, I can see that aspect of it. You see, for example, Manchester City bought over, and everything there is Etihad. It's the Etihad Stadium, the jersey, the sponsors, Etihad. You see it all around the stadium. It's almost as if these companies are buying teams just to promote their own brand. There's not really that interest in football, but they know that if the team's successful, the brand's successful, and it's out there. So I can understand why the new owners of Inter are trying to do that, and trying to promote whatever their main brand may be. And it's kind of the way football's went. Like Arsenal, for years and years, Highbury Stadium, that was what it was known as. And then they move into this new stadium. Everyone knows it as the Emirates. It's just the way football's kind of going nowadays, and it's almost following that kind of NFL kind of system where a team can move so easily. And that, to me, wouldn't be a major surprise if you see, for example, a Manchester United moving to London. I think something like that could generally happen because at the end of the day, money will talk. And the owners don't really care whether the team's based in Manchester or London. They care about whether they can get the sponsorship. They care about how much money they can bring into the teams, and how much money they can make for themselves. So it's a sad way that football's going, and it's kind of getting away from its original roots. But when teams are successful, some fans kind of just forget about that aspect of things. And for owners, if they want to continue making money, they're going to do whatever that does. And if that means ending a iconic sponsorship like Inter and Pirelli to bring in, I don't even know, maybe whatever Indian brand it may be, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would definitely agree with what you said there. You're nearly seeing an NFL-ication of football in many ways. Money-driven solely, emotional ties to the community or to a certain city. I agree. I think it might seem far-fetched now, but maybe in 20 years' time, a high-profile team could move from Manchester to a London because of the economics of the situation. And unfortunately, it just is the way it is. And then that filters through the rest of the game. You look at a lack of loyalty to players. You look at some clubs, in effect, being feeder clubs, such as Man City, kind of nearly, in effect, buying or creating clubs to create a feeder system that all feeds into Man City as the overall brand. And do you think FIFA or even UEFA, from a European aspect, do they care? Can they change it? Can they do anything at all?
Can they? Probably. Will they? Probably not. And ironic as it sounds, it comes back to where the smart money is. And the smart money is in having these teams being successful, having them playing on your major tournament, and having the best players there. It wouldn't surprise me in years to come if you see perhaps you've probably already seen it. Daniel Arzani had a fantastic World Cup, picked up by Man City to then go to Celtic, who quite a few people see as sort of a Man City feeder team. And then he goes out on loan, I think, is it to Melbourne City? They've got the New York City Football Club over there as well. And Red Bull's the big example here. Red Bull New York, Red Bull Salzburg, Red Bull Leipzig. You see players moving between these teams all the time. Not even just that, it's like management teams moving as well. There was a discussion the other day on a Celtic State of Mind about Jesse Marsh taking the Celtic job when it looks as if he's going to replace the German boy that's in charge of Leipzig when he moves on. It's all about keeping it within the brand, keeping it within the sort of family. And if anyone's like a big Formula One fan, you see that already. You see things like Red Bull, who also have a second team called Alpha Tauri. And it's like, that's their feeder team. This is what's happening in football. And it's kind of a sad way that it's actually going, because teams are losing their identity all to conglomerates and to money.
It definitely is. And I think the Red Bull situation is a very interesting one. Could we see, and this again, people might say, what are you drinking? Maybe in 10 years' time, Glasgow Red Bull. Could you see even for example, if we look at the Irish game, Dublin Red Bull City or something like that, that is a potential. Surely these guys have enough money in their pocket to set up these teams, and then, as you said, use them as feeder clubs. Bring players within that network over to Dublin, over to Glasgow, make them successful. Bring those players away then to a Man City or whoever that feeder club is. You could be looking at it from a global footprint, even more beyond what it is right now. Which, as a traditional football fan, that's quite a scary prospect.
Yeah, I don't think that's 100 miles away from where it's actually going to end up. I mean, if you listen to that interview that was just mentioning about Jesse Marsh, Red Bull has a connection with Celtic already. Now, can you imagine the kind of uproar if it became Red Bull Celtic? That would be, as a Celtic fan personally, that would be unthinkable. But I honestly could see something like that happening to maybe not a Celtic or a Rangers, but Red Bull Aberdeen, Red Bull Dundee. I wouldn't rule it out. Wouldn't rule it out at all.
And then all that memorabilia you have from Celtic, it's probably worth a lot more.
Well, it would be sold as NFTs later down the line at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's everything we've kind of covered off today. So thanks so much for being the first guest on, Colin, on the Smart Money podcast. And as well, thanks to everyone who tuned in. Be sure to subscribe on A State of Mind's YouTube channel. As said, this is going to be a monthly podcast. We'll have other guests on. Colin will obviously be on again. And unfortunately with Cameron, it just didn't work out today. But as Colin said, we'll definitely try and do a pre-record interview with Cameron. And no internet issues in Fife or in Shanghai or even in Boston. I think we'll be fine. And again, that will be just around the overall Chinese game. He's a very forthright individual. So I think if you're tuning into this, you'll definitely tune into that. So again, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you for joining us as well, Colin. It was great to chat again. And be sure to check out A State of Mind's